It's D-Tech. We're back. On the last episode, we talked about the shift in education and where it is headed. On this episode, we're taking a little bit of a shift in topics, and we're going to talk about how millennials are killing stuff because millennials are evil.
Yes.
And this has been known.
You know how long they've been killing stuff, Skyler?
Since they were born.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Specifically, this type of topic's been around since 2000 and about early 10, 11. Somewhere in there. So this is actually an old story in a way.
Well, that's what I've noticed. It's so weird because I feel like it was fairly recent that millennial became a buzzword, but I felt like it was a buzzword for a lot of people who were actually millennials but didn't realize it. Because I think people didn't have an original understanding of what that even was. When people said millennial, they just were saying young.
Yeah. Well, and I think marketers came up with these generational terms because they have to learn how to sell to the newest generation every 10 years or so. And of course, technology's speeding that up. So we're going to not only talk about millennials, we're going to talk about future generations or generations that come after. But let's focus on millennials because they get a lot of memes. Why are you so heavily memed, Skyler?
Why am I so memed? Depending.
And what are you?
Hey, it depends on who. If one generation is taking more heat than the other, then I'll claim the other one, the good one. Oh. Because I was born in 96, and depending on which chart you're looking at, I could go in either one. So we recently had a blog post about our podcast, and I said that I was a millennial Gen Z hybrid, which is true, but
he was created in a lab.
I don't know. I think the reason that millennials take so much heat is because everyone wants someone else to blame. You know, the older generations are blaming the young people are blaming the old people, and that's just kind of how it goes. Everyone's constantly looking to pass the buck.
I think if we travel back to 2000, like 300 BC, there would be generational complaints.
Absolutely.
These youth and
they don't understand.
I don't know what kind of music they had back then. But anyway, I just think this is the way it goes. But marketers really hone in on this because I think they're not only trying to describe the current generation, but they're trying to put them into a box to sell them boxes, to sell them
True.
products.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's what I think. A lot of it. It's like does art mimic real life or does real life mimic art? It's like yes to both of those.
Yeah, well, I mean, in marketing, you're hoping that these generations fit a particular box because the more they are stereotypical, I guess, the easier it is to sell.
Well, I think speaking of these generations, let's just tell them real quick what they look like. Generation Y or millennials is roughly 1981 to 1996. Generation Z or Zoomers is 95 to 2015, which means there's another generation, but I thought we should set that up just so you know what age demographic we're talking about. Basically, 1981 to 96. And it's so weird for me being Generation X because you're so young to me.
Yeah, it's true. What's really strange, and like I was kind of talking about, a lot of people, even people I worked with, would call me a millennial, but then I kind of thought about it, and I was like, you realize you're making fun of me for being a millennial, but you are also a millennial. Some of these millennials are almost 40 now.
Well,
so
and
they're getting
anybody can
old.
be called a Karen, if you know what the meme is on Karens. Anybody can get called a boomer, too. I see millennials, quote-unquote, throwing down the okay boomer on other millennials, so... It's yes, there are these categories, but they're getting mushed together on social media.
Well, I feel like anyone's dad is pretty much being called a boomer.
Yeah.
Anyone that's a father has probably been called a boomer at some point by their kids, even though most boomers are almost 60.
It's so strange. Well, and the boomer generation ended in 1965. So Gen X, which I'm a part of, born in 74, we were known as the nomad generation. Because boomers had all of this ties to the previous generations and came out of a world war and kind of the old school 1950s. That's where they were born. And so now it's like, who are the Gen Xers? Well, we are truly the nomads. We've come from the old world to the new world. I remember for half my life, I did not have a cell phone. 27 years, no cell phone. and somehow the world went on. So I don't want to get too autobiographical. It is nice to set the stage for what are these generations.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about all these generations, and they're talking about it a lot now. We've read through a lot of articles how millennials are killing stuff, but every generation killed things. And that's just because to be successful in business, you constantly have to pivot to fit the needs of who they're selling to. And as technology advances, we just want everything to be more convenient.
Well, you know what? 2 episodes ago, we talked about AR and VR technology. I remember, though, specifically we referenced, like, back in the 1920s, parents were concerned because their kids were on radio so much. They were listening to the radio. I think you brought that up. And so this is not new. I think it would be interesting to talk specifically about industries or services that have kind of been killed, so to speak, by millennials or Generation Y. I noticed that millennials are buying homes later than previous generations, but when they do finally get a home, it's nicer. So they're a lot more likely to live at home longer. Why is this?
Right. Well, I think it's a combination of things. Millennials have the highest amount of debt from going to school.
Yeah.
So we assume a lot of debt. So I don't think we want to make commitments like that as early. I also think that millennials like to be mobile, and that's because a lot of these, like, most people aren't going to stay at one job for their entire adult life. People are changing jobs every couple of years.
Yeah, that started in my generation, but now especially it's 1 to 3 years is the average.
Yeah, there's not as much security, so in a couple of years you don't know where you'll be. So I think it's a lot scarier to settle down in a particular region.
Well, why haven't you bought a home?
I don't have the money for it. I don't have the money to make a down payment on a house like that.
Well, and maybe that's a good thing in a way. I know that certain industries really want you to get a home quick, but I'm not sure when they say the American dream is to own your home. I'm not sure that's a lot to take on, and it's not an asset financially for a lot of people. So maybe this is a good trend. You wait till you're ready, but your starter home will be nicer statistically.
Right.
Here's some other things. I want to get your take as well, because I grew up in the older generation. So here's some things they say there have been killed or in the process. Napkins. Golf is way down statistically. Casual dining chains like Hooters, Ruby Tuesdays, Applebees, Buffalo Wild Wings, cable, hotels. I mean, that's a lot. Oh, middle children. The current generation, we're not having more than 2 kids, and so middle kids are disappearing.
Yeah.
So I guess with like restaurants and golf and these types of experiences, like, what's your feedback on that?
I'm going to say that millennials can be described as a generation that hates commitment.
Really?
I mean, I think you kind of see the trend in all these things. They don't want to buy houses earlier. That's a commitment. They don't want to sit down at these sit-down restaurants. That's a commitment. Playing golf is a commitment.
That is such a commitment. To even get mediocre at golf, you're talking months or years.
Well, I mean, I will say there are a lot of millennials that still like golf. I have friends that are totally obsessed with it. They'll golf every day after work. But for me, this is my thought processing. I'm like, I don't understand it because I couldn't imagine every single day committing 2 to 4 hours to golf after work.
Hey, this is a Generation Xer who can totally agree with you. I'm not a lover of golf, but overall, nationwide, it's way down. Some other things I'm going to throw at you because I like your perspective. Home improvement stores like Home Depot and others are way down. That would tie back into homes. The beer industry. Apparently your generation prefers wine to spirits. Wine and spirits to beer. I don't know what to say about that. Sales are down for beer.
I don't know what to say about that. I will say, like, I've noticed, which, I mean, I only know what I know because I've only been around for with millennials, but I think something I've noticed the older I get is more people are taking pride in being sober. Yeah. And like not being into drugs and alcohol. Like you see a lot of people like in the addict and alcoholic community, and I think there's a lot more pride in being healthy.
Well, yeah, the beer gut's a real thing. Everybody knows that beer will make you gain weight, but you never hear someone say, "Yeah, I really got fat drinking all that whiskey," So I think that might be it because of social media and Instagram and those types of services. People want to posture and look better. So beer will not give you
I would
that.
agree. I mean, we also do live in an Instagram world as well. Like for me, it's like what looks classier, being like in this nice suit with like a glass of whiskey or just holding a Bud Light.
With your big beard. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep moving on. This list is interesting. Divorce is way down, but you can probably guess why. There's
Because
less marriage.
less people get married. Again, commitment thing.
So cereal purchase is way down for that generation, but they don't look at cereal as a breakfast or a meal. They look at it as a snack.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've always noticed is that for me, cereal always tastes better at night. I don't know what it is, but it seems to just hit the spot when you're just have the late night munchies.
Yeah, as a father of 3, I'd always give my kids a little bowl of cereal before nighttime because they were always hungry. That's like a code word for kids.
It's just a quick and light snack. But for me, when it comes to not having cereal in the morning as breakfast, I read a bunch of things that a lot of people said it wasn't quick enough or that it was messy. But I personally,
not convenient.
Most mornings I don't even eat breakfast at all. So,
yeah, I think I read that that's a trend among millennials. They don't eat breakfast. I used to be that way, but I got to have some fuel in the tank. So, but I was just saying earlier, you'll learn when you have kids, like when you say it's bedtime, that's really code for cereal time. So they always want a bowl. Let's look at let's see, football, NFL, college sports. Their popularity has decreased quite a bit with the millennials.
I mean, again, well, and one thing I look at, like, we have lower attention spans, and again, like watching an entire football game is also a commitment. I think I heard so if you watch a football game, it lasts for about 3 hours. Yeah. But out of that 3 hours, only about, I think, 12 to 15 minutes are football is actually being played. The rest of the time, it's commercials, it's in their huddles, timeouts, challenges.
Well, and then you say, well, with DVR, viewing of these sports went up for a bit. There was a 5-year period, but then it's going down again because even with DVR, they don't want to fast forward through all that. It's like eating cereal. It's simple, but they don't want to deal with it.
Well, the reason I want to record on a DVR is because there's no way I'm not going to know between all my friends who usually like the same teams, or either they want to like throw it in my face and my team lost, or if I get on Twitter, like there's just one way or another I'm going to find out. There's no way.
There's no way to avoid it nowadays.
Right.
And so like ESPN's taking a huge dip. Here's some other things. Light yogurt is taking a dive. People like Greek yogurt for some reason. Motorcycles. Millennials just aren't riding motorcycles. Bar soap, diamonds. Diamonds are interesting because that's always been a girl's best friend, quote unquote, or a symbol of your love and marriage. And I think movies like Blood Diamonds, there's other instances that you've seen where it's been a pretty bad business in some ways, and people are super environmentally conscious now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you see all the rappers and people, all the celebrities in mainstream media with their chains and everything else, all the accessories. But I think there's been a real spike in minimalism.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I would never finance diamonds because what's the point? Like, it doesn't really serve me in any way.
When I got married 23 years ago, like that's what you did, and I spent thousands on a carat diamond. So yeah, and I think they're developing them in labs now as well, so they're so much cheaper. You can go from 3,000 to 300. All right, here's some more. And you didn't realize you were the Generation Y representative today.
I am.
You hybrid.
I am.
Let's see, fabric softener. Like people don't use it.
I never use it. And it was funny because I read about this and they were saying most millennials don't even know what it's used for, and I couldn't think of why people use it.
You know why I do?
Why?
Because my boomer mom always made my clothes smell so good and they're softer. So
I get like all those. I get those like little like what are they, like those little like pebbles?
Yeah.
That you put in with your laundry.
So
that makes it smell really good.
So there's some caveats to that.
Yeah.
banks and other financial institutions, less than 40% of millennials ever visit a branch. Do you ever go to the bank?
If I either to like cash a check or if I have like, well, especially now, like most places don't even want to take cash anymore. So I've went to the bank just to put that into my checking.
And I have done some deposits via the app, so you can take a picture and just deposit it.
Yeah.
So you have to wait longer for it to hit the funds to hit. So I'm still like, I'll go through the drive-through.
Yeah, the banks are one of those things that I don't think anyone should be outraged, because if you can do something just at your home through an app, why would you take the time to go to the bank?
That's one of the jobs that I specifically read millennials have killed is a bank teller. It's one of the fastest falling jobs because everything's robotic. Department stores, designer handbags, those kind of go together. Malls are dying. I mean, they are just closing. Hundreds of malls have closed in the last 5 years.
Which I actually think this is really sad. Like anytime I go to a mall, it's just a really sad, depressing place because there's not many people in there. And I think, I don't like it. I wish it was still thriving because we were kind of talking about this earlier, but for people who are younger, there's not as many go-to places to meet people. Like I feel like that's one of the places you'd go and meet up with your friends.
How many 80s movies? As a kid of the 80s, like going to the mall was like the most exciting thing.
Yeah.
Because you could go to the arcade, so there was that. But then there was also we go looking for girls.
Of course.
We loved that as my guy friends. I don't know. It was just you go look at clothes. So I'd leave having gone to the arcade, hunting for chicks, so-called, and then I got a new pair of pants or some shirts. Like that was such a big deal as a kid. Plus, we also lived an hour away from the closest mall, and so going there was just like going to a different world.
See, and I'm not gonna say that malls are dying; they're dead.
Yeah.
Because I remember being like a really young kid and they were still pretty busy. But by the time I hit junior high school, there was no one there.
I went to the mall for the first time 3 weeks ago. First time in like, I don't know, a year or two. Like it's been so long and it was just a ghost town. Mm-hmm. Part of that has to do with the COVID.
Or even in Salt Lake, like Gateway was the hot spot.
Yeah.
But I mean, City Creek is actually really busy, but Gateway was the spot and it's absolute ghost town. Everything's shutting down there and it makes me sad.
I remember that.
So many memories there.
Well, I lived in Salt Lake, northern Utah, and I used to go there all the time. I think that's most of the list here. Like, and I heard Amazon's in talks with JCPenney to buy their stores to turn them into distribution centers.
Really?
I just read that today.
I mean, that's smart.
It's just crazy. So that infrastructure's there. Here's another thing. Your traditional get ripped gyms like Vasa and others, they're getting opted out of for more of those class-centric ones. Like there's one by where I used to live, Orange, I think it's called. I know a lot of women go there because it's just very tailored towards women. So I think you're a member of a gym.
I am.
You're in Vasa.
Yeah.
So is that still busy when you go?
It's still pretty busy.
Of course, we live in a sunny area.
Busier than I would prefer, but yeah, I could definitely see that. I know a lot of people that prefer doing yoga or going to a CrossFit gym and I don't know, and I could kind of see why, because most of the time when I work out, like it's by myself. So when you join these groups, like you have that camaraderie, you have that group that's holding each other accountable. Like it's just more of a full experience rather than, all right, I'm just going to lift these weights and hopefully I get stronger.
Walk around.
Like you make lifelong friends with the same goals as you.
That's true. That's well, and we're going to run out of time here in this segment, but I wanted to bring a couple things up. You said that boomers or that previous generations killed things. Like boomers killed cassette tapes for CDs, and they killed restaurants for diners, or they killed diners for restaurants. There is one thing that's interesting. Gen Zers, which is the next generation, 93% of them prefer to shop without the help of sales associate. So the old days of someone coming up to you trying to help you find your shoe or your size, like they don't want to deal with that.
Yeah.
What is wrong with you guys? You're so anti-human.
Hey, no, I'm going to say, like, growing up with boomer parents, my dad was the worst when it came to that.
Really?
He hated being bugged, and if he would sit and search his store for hours before he would ever ask somebody for help. Mm-hmm.
Maybe
And I feel like it's kind of a guy thing
I
too.
think so.
Guys have pride. They want to go and they want to find it on their own. They don't need help.
No, and I've decided, I think about 10 years ago, I decided to be the opposite of that. And it sure works out, guys. I'm just saying. Ask for directions and help. It really saves you time.
Yes, it does. But I will say, I think a lot of these younger generations have just seen all these advertisements and all these sales, these people. And I think it's pretty common knowledge. They're not helping you because they want to be helpful. It's usually because they get a cut of whatever they sell.
Yeah, or that's just what their job is. I remember the old days when you would like have the fill-up guy at the station. And well, there's some specific examples here. Apparel brands marketing to teens are on big on the decline. Abercrombie and Fitch and Urban Outfitters have seen a 68% drop in the number of store locations in North America since 2016. Holy cow. That
is bizarre.
2/3 of your entire store chain is just gone.
Yeah.
In 4 years.
Yeah, I think you can attribute that to a couple different things, because I think, again, with like the minimalism, I know a lot of people that don't like wearing brands because it's overpriced and you're paying a bunch of money to be a walking advertisement for them.
And personally, I don't like wearing the same thing everybody else is.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm part of the horde. I never liked that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I was young, I did because it made me cool, but not anymore.
Yeah. I also, and it might be from people being hazed over the years, because growing up, if someone had Abercrombie and Fitch or Aeropostale, like they were harassed for wearing those brands. Yeah.
They were just too good for everyone, huh?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, there's always a backlash and a turning against, a rebellion against the status quo, even when that used to be rebellion. Now it became status quo. I mean, this is a cycle.
Yeah.
But I think we're out of time in this segment. So we've established what's happened through Millennials, Generation Y. So now it's going to be time to look towards the future. But before we do,
we're going to take a little break for some tech trivia.
Now, if you want to enter our great giveaways, all you got to do is email your answers for these 3 questions to trivia@infowest.com.
Great prizes, so you will not want to miss out.
Here's your 3 questions for this episode. Number 1, given the rise of search engines, what does SEO stand for? Number 2, what product did Amazon first start selling? Number 3, intermittent windshield wipers were introduced by whom? All right, everyone, that's your 3 tech questions. You can send your answers to trivia@infowest.com. Make sure you send those in. Your chances of winning are very good.
Welcome back. On the first segment, we talked about which industries the millennials have killed, quote unquote. And on the second segment, we want to talk about what industries are going to be killed by the Zoomers and the generations after that. I'm sick of being made fun of. It's time for us to make fun of the Zoomers.
This is we're going to offer a little bit of therapy and help to the millennials. I think they've been maligned. You guys are okay. We like you, and you're going to be fine.
You know what? I realized the boomers had it so hard working on the farms. They walked to school going uphill both ways. But the millennials have been beat up as well with all the student debt.
You don't really, I mean, you can't really say, oh, it's my fault I was born at this time. I mean, it just is. And I think a lot of it, there are trends for sure, but then there's exaggeration. In fact, what you just said sounded like a boomer. Walking to school uphill.
Well, because I heard it from my boomer father.
And that's the thing. Like, the current generations, like, online life, the singularity, meaning everything goes online in our brains and our thoughts. Everything is just public and transparent now. It's like that's kind of mushed together multiple generations. Like, I just feel like, well, I'm curious to see where we'll be in 50 years. There are these trends, like American teens. Oh, and let's just tell them, what is the new generation called? We had Generation Z, which are sometimes called Zoomers, derogatorily online. But Generation Alpha, that's a new nickname for the current, starting after 2015. And they are supposed to number 2 billion by the year 2025.
You know what? I think they should have to earn their stripes. How can they be 5 years old and already get a cool name like Alpha?
I love that.
They haven't earned anything.
Well, they ran out of letters. Generation Z, they have to go back. So now they're going to do the...
Just call them A for now.
Yeah, the A generation.
Until they earn it.
Well, and that's the thing. They've been called the Uber generation, which refers to the ride-sharing app, but basically how they're going to approach things. They'll obviously be the most technologically literate. They say they'll be the most educated in these articles, but I'm like, I don't know. Define education. They'll have a lot of data.
They'll have a lot of information.
But that doesn't mean they're educated or wise.
It's
Wisdom
true.
is an application of knowledge with correct principles, so I'm not sure if they're going to be
It
wise
could
or
be,
not.
I mean, we probably shouldn't speculate too much, but they might have the most information, but it'll be interesting to see like how they are with common sense.
And with relationships, because these generations, even yours, there is this, well, we talked about in the first segment, 93% of current generation doesn't want to deal with the salesperson in a store or anywhere. They just want to order things. In fact, the number one thing that will be an influencer on this current generation is technology utilization. In fact, I'll share 3 things, but they said that by the time they're age 7, at least 1/7 of their life will be spent in front of a screen. And you said, as a boomer millennial,
As a boomer millennial, I think that is way on the low end. Like if it's only 1/7 of their life, they're going to be like the pilgrim of that generation.
so what do you think? Do you think that's a really bad thing, a good thing? Is it kind of amoral being on screen so much?
I mean, there's the silver lining in all things, but I think it's a bad thing
Overall?
because it's just too much programming all the time.
Well, it's like when you're an employer hiring people, you want people who can focus on a specific task or tasks every day. Now, with your generation and Generation Z, you were nomads. You were moving all the time, changing jobs, changing locations, changing schools, changing your habits. And so as an employer, I'm looking for someone who's stable and can focus. I think that completely short circuits the whole process.
Way too overstimulated. I think it's gonna like jobs are almost gonna become, if they haven't already, gonna be like growing up in elementary school, or I guess for me, like in junior high and high school, where they would take away our phones. I feel like that's gonna become a real thing at jobs, and like blocking certain websites just so people can stay on task.
Well, they said that during job interviews, the Generation Z people are reaching for their phones during the interview. And
Really?
they said that's a real problem, or they're reaching if the interviewer hears a buzz or something, they're reaching for it, and it's like that's a big no-no. And in fact, when I go to lunch appointments, I will not get out my phone.
No way.
I hate that
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like I'm here to focus on you, focus on me.
Well, yeah, for younger generation, because even with me, like I've been taught, like that's a sign of disrespect. Like you're not paying attention to the person you're with if you're going for your phone, or you're showing disinterest. So just out of respect for the other person, you shouldn't do that.
Or wearable tech's a real thing now. Like my son has always got earbuds in, but they're Bluetooth enabled, so they're wireless. And so we have a rule: you have to keep one of those out of your ear because I have to say things over and over to get his attention. And so we've made that compromise, but he's always got to want to be plugged in, always. And so I have to be creative as a parent to distract or to take his focus. Like we were filling up a little garden box and he didn't have earbuds in, and he was just like messing with soil and manure, getting dirty, and he was like, this is way more fun than I thought. And I'm thinking this is exactly the opposite of digital dopamine stimulation.
Yeah.
And he's liking it. So I don't think humans completely change. We might think we're all androids and robots in the future, but I don't think the core component leaves.
Well, I mean, yeah, who knows? Maybe it will flip from that, and there will be less phone usage. Because for me, growing up, like the first iPhone came out in like 2008, 2009, around then. So for all of us, that was a new thing. But it's almost going to be a new thing to go out and garden or get actual physical activity.
Well, you remember,
like play organized sports, things like that.
One of the biggest things is that the Generation Z and Alpha, they want to order everything. They want it delivered. So they order the coffee on the way to work. They literally just want to grab it. They don't want to deal with anyone. They want to scan their device and they're out of there. They want to be picked up by an Uber driver. So it's extreme convenience, but it's also human avoidance to a point.
Well, is it going to feel like we're talking to aliens when we talk to these younger generations? Because I feel like they're not going to know how to interact with people.
Yet their memes and all of their culture online, I am amazed at my young son, 13, who knows pop culture references from the 50s, 60s, 80s into the 2000s, movies. Like, there's this weird, like I said, the singularity where all of the information is being piped into everyone. And I think eventually, I've said for years, we're all going to be millennials in that we want instant gratification. I want information now, and I can get it at all times.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I kind of went off there.
You want information without having to ask people. You want products without having to actually see somebody. You prefer your package just left at your door where you don't have to talk to anybody and then just go run back inside and hide.
Well, drone delivery. Like, when I was a kid, I remember having to wait for weeks or months to go see something, a show, a whatever. It was always a waiting game, and the world seems super big, and now the entire catalog of human existence is in my pocket. Trippy.
It's weird. Yeah.
So here's the three things that we had this. I looked at this Skyler, this marketer, and he's the one pushing the Generation Alpha name. And so he says the three things that have to do with selling is technological utilization, environment, meaning the planet, and how brands are developed. Those are the three things shifting. He talked about, beyond just wanting everything convenient and ordered, environment. All of the generation now are being raised to care about your environmental impact, your carbon footprint, what you think about the planet. Like, what's your experience been with that? Because when I was a kid, I could have cared less about any of that, except being killed by nuclear bombs. That was the only time I thought about the planet.
I don't know. I think I think it's good, to care about these things and care about your planet, but I've had an interesting take on it because it's like, I've seen certain documentaries like the Morgan Spurlock documentary where it says cage-free on the on the carton or whatever, but there are pretty much loopholes for it. Like, they pretty much have to have a time in the day where they can see sunlight to be considered cage-free.
Yeah, and it can be like a 10-foot pan outside the door.
So I don't know. I think it's good that everyone's concerned about it, but I've always been an outside the box and thought, is it helping that much?
Well, there's part of me that's cynical on the environmental stuff, that it's all just marketing, and it makes people feel good, the organic label, all that. I worked in the food industry for a while, and I can tell you what is labeled as organic is not always organic. In fact, they will let you do up to a certain percentage non-organic and still call it organic, which is interesting. So I've always thought like that. So I don't know. I've never went out of my way to get these particular products just because I realize there's loopholes and minimums that you have to do to be able to label it that way. And the food's is perfect in the stores. Like, you go into big stores and buy groceries, and the vegetables and fruit look perfect. There's no blemishes. They look like something off a magazine cover or off Instagram, but there's very little nutritional value. Enzymes are gone in so many of our products. So it's like, yes, we want convenience, and we want that movie that looks like the future where you order food and it's all, but the healthiness of stuff is gone. So the environmental claims I'm not real big on.
Right.
The third thing, talking about how brands are developed, because everybody will order everything online, he says they will only have, Generation Alpha will only have a 3 to 4 year brand allegiance, then they'll move on. And I will add that I know this from experience. About 90% of all apps that are downloaded to your phone are used once and never used again. So there's this huge shift that we are not loyal to brands. And I think that's partly due to Generation Z's use of the meme, shut up brand. Have you seen that?
I have seen that, yeah.
Explain that for our list, or I'll explain. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is the shut up brand meme?
Shut up brand, pretty much them taking social stances.
Well, it's a crab that has laser beams shooting out of its eyes specifically, and it says shut up brand. It's basically saying, hey, we know you're trying to manipulate us into buying your product, or as a company making us think you care. So just shut
Right.
up. Like,
Right.
I think the current generation's like, just show me what I want and why I want it. Not, but at the same time, then they're like, but be great for the environment.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always that push and pull. Like, don't say too much, but you got to say something.
And save the world while you're at it with your chicken nuggets.
See, yeah, that's what I'll say. Gen Z and millennials are at times can be confused generations on what exactly they want.
Well, they want perfect food, but also perfect mission and a perfect message and perfect convenience.
Right.
That's Generation Alpha. I want perfection.
Well, so what I was going to say is that the 3 to 4 year brand allegiance, that makes a ton of sense because initially they could like what they're saying, but then 3 to 4 years down the road, they say something they don't like and they're like, I'm over it.
Oh, yeah. You got one bad tweet or one bad position. This current generation, they'll not only stop doing business, they'll cancel you.
Not only your tweet, but a retweet or something you liked.
Yep.
Donald Trump actually put on record that he's gotten in more trouble over retweets than his own tweets.
The best or worst thing that you could have happen to you is have Donald Trump endorse your company.
Right.
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 It might be wonderful if you're conservative. If you're liberal, you want to blow that business up, or vice versa. You'll boycott, you'll dox. I mean, it's really intense, the reaction to companies. And navigating those waters and thinking about a company is just a bunch of human beings, so it's not a monolith.
Yeah, which I almost feel like that's kind of weird, like generational shift, because I feel like before people always praise the president, but now it's like the president of the United States endorses it. I don't want it.
It's not only bad now, it's a crime in your mind to support, like Apple. Apple was the darling. Like, I remember in '84 when that commercial came out, guy throws the sledgehammer into the screen. It's a hit at IBM. I actually remember that in 1984. I was 10, seeing that. It was just like, whoa, the future's here. But now Apple's no longer the darlings. We're talking about child labor in China, not paying taxes, all these things, and people are starting to really hammer the darling of the liberals and progressives, and now not even Apple's pure enough. So it's interesting.
Yeah, no one's safe.
Nobody.
No one is safe.
They're going to get you. Here,
maybe Chick-fil-A, though.
Chick-fil-A, well, they've survived.
They seem pretty safe.
They've survived. Well, I found another thing I wanted you to comment on since you're in this demographic age. They said that 40% will never marry of Generation Alpha. And so what do you think of that? What do you think about marriage at your age? You're 24, right?
Yeah. Well, 24 at the end of the month, so
Yeah.
24 enough. Yeah.
So how do
Scary.
you look at marriage and when you date or when you see or hang out? That's what you do nowadays, hang out.
Hang out.
How do you view marriage?
How do I view marriage?
Why aren't you married?
I think I would like to one day, but
Don't answer that question.
yeah, I don't know.
No, but how do you look at marriage? Is it something really important to you, or is it just?
Well, I would say I definitely view it as less important, and I think that's just a lot of that. Not necessarily has to do with like the climate of today, but like just previous experiences. Like I've realized, in past relationships that these girls who I had envisioned marrying were, the last person I'd want to spend the rest of my life with. So,
Well, you don't have to.
I just think,
put it all out there, but
yeah,
that's some real talk there. Yeah,
no,
it's got to be hard because you're in the hangout generation with the digital buffer of swiping and liking.
Well, I was going to say we're in a scandal generation.
Really?
So a reason I'm saying this is because we have our dating apps that make it so easy, but it's not. Dating apps aren't the only dating apps. Facebook and Instagram are also dating apps.
Absolutely. In our young generations, that's the primary thing is posturing and looking for a mate or someone to hang out with.
Not only that, but I think we've almost kind of been programmed that these relationships aren't going to last forever with divorce rates being high. And we have all of these Netflix shows showing all of this scandal and cheating and everything else.
Making it glamorized, too.
Right, yeah.
Well, I also heard something about women I'm going to share because this was fascinating. They did a poll of Tinder and one other app users, and they found that women rate men on these apps as moderately attractive or higher only 8% of men online. But the men that are online rated 60% or higher as moderately attractive or higher. So I don't know if that made sense how I explained it. So basically, 6 out of 10 women, the men online are going to be like, possibly I would go out with her. But women, it's less than 10%. And so it's been the shift in the sexes because men are traditionally looked at like, they're all physical and more on the physical, shallow basis. But they're finding that a lot of women use Tinder and other apps for social validation and physical validation, which is a little weird. But you mentioned another app, Bumble.
Bumble, yeah.
Is a new one where the women have to reach
the girls, yeah, which makes it easier for the guys. But
well, and I'm not exactly sure how this relates, other than the way relationships work moving forward is shifted from the baby boomer generation.
Absolutely,
and the romance around marriage.
Oh yeah,
is gone. I think. Maybe not completely. Like on Instagram, you see all the posturing and poses for bridal pictures.
Well, and I've got to say, it's like, I don't know, you're never safe. Like in a relationship, especially if you're a little bit younger, if you get in a bad fight with your girlfriend, then, she's probably has multiple guys messaging her on these social platforms. So getting a little fight, the grass might start looking a little greener. So,
well, they had one in that study. One lady in particular she was an attractive lady. She got like 2,000 inquiries or whatever it is. So you can tell I don't use those apps, but she whittled it down to just 20 potentials, 10s, most maybe probablys, to only 2 were up to snuff for her, and she only went out with 1 out of 2,000. That's how picky, and I think women can be picky because that's something that now that they kind of dominate the apps with. So I don't know. It's a brave new world, I guess.
It is.
We're in a more of a peak feminine time than we have in the past. I mean, the graduation of women is 60% of all degrees are now female. So that's a big shift as well. I think women are far more focused on career than old generations. So I don't know. This isn't a gender podcast, but it is a huge thing. In fact, psychologists are concerned about this generation because of the rewiring of brains. I read that this generation will have less empathy, be more narcissistic, have less focus, and the inability to create sexual relationships where love is involved. Boy, that sounds like just put this generation out to pasture.
This is
That's what a psychologist said.
This podcast episode just got very depressing.
So, okay, well, let's end this podcast and this segment with something positive. What is it?
What's the positive thing?
I don't know. Well, maybe there will be. Okay, we talked about rebellion. Maybe the current generation will be so plugged in and so consumed with digital dopamine that they'll just burn out on it. Like last night, I said I need to get off social media so much. I literally said that.
Yeah, I mean, there's gotta be a point where you just like hit that all-time low, where you're just running out of all your dopamine sources. Everyone's all drugged up to make up for that, and then
your food has no nutrition.
Then it gets to a point where it's like we're so plugged in now. We don't want to leave our house. Everything's got to be convenient. So we get to the point where we're spending no time with anybody. And so which makes sense as to why people would be more narcissistic, less empathy, because they're not actually around people. So is it going to get to a breaking point that we're finally like, I want to be around people? This is a very unfulfilling life.
Yeah, where we're connected to all, attached to none.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see. We did talk about maybe some downsides, but I'm always hopeful the human race can prevail, and honestly, maybe people will be like, where does my food come from? Maybe I should grow my own food.
Right.
Or maybe I should make my own clothes. Or maybe I should if I'm so big on environmental messages, maybe I ought to do something in the environment that
step up and do it myself.
Takes away that carbon footprint, as they call it, or your impact. Maybe you'll step up. We shall see.
We shall see. Only time will tell.
But until then,
we'll see you next time. This was another great episode of Discover Tech. We really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave some feedback, whether it's positive or negative. We're always open. And leave a 5-star review. It really helps us out. But until next time,
The future is here.